Well, God, nice to have you with us as we talked about what's going on as far as the world of sports is concerned. Hi, everybody. Yours truly, Christopher Russo, kicking off a broadcast day here on the great SiriusXM 82. The fellas are in the house today. It's 1-800-MAD DOGS, 1-888-MAD DOGS 6 is your two-way sports talk telephone number. We'll do a little college football. That a little later on. We'll spend the first part of our day in the NFL. Wild card weekend in the National Football League. It's not as frozen in America as it had been. Off a brutal weekend as we chat to you about what's cooking on this afternoon show. Eddie Erickson, Colin Schmeling, and of course Billy Z. We'll get a word or two out of Steve Torrey. Maybe I'll play a little Gary Danielson back on the 5 o'clock hour. We had him on Thursday. We'll chop a little of that up if necessary, but we'll spend most of our time today on the National Football League. I think the college gets swallowed up by playing this championship game on the Monday night after the weekend, of course, of the NFL. That will be a discussion. We'll get into that maybe a little later on. To play a college football game tonight, now you're going to watch it. To me, I got to have a day to breathe before I start worrying about the Alabama-Georgia game. I don't know what the solution is. I have a solution. It's probably not gettable, doable. They should finish the college football on New Year's Day. That's the last game. It's almost, once the NFL playoffs begin, to go back to college football is tricky. We'll get to that a little later on. All right, here we have it now. First off, let's get into the big picture first. Vegas had a killing this weekend. That's the first thing. I'll raise my hand because, and so Eddie and Bill Zimmerman, the same thing. Torrey, my gosh. If you went favorites this weekend, you got absolutely pounded because of the fact that all the underdogs either covered or all the underdogs won outright. And so much for the little rule that our little quarters friends have, saying that take the team that you think is going to win because invariably they do. Last year, 14-0, either there was an upset or the favorite covered. Not this year because Buffalo got points, didn't win, and covered, and obviously same with Carolina. And then, of course, the disasters on Saturday for the Chiefs and for the Rams, especially for Kansas City. But it was an underdog theme all weekend in the NFL. I don't know when's the last time. You went 2-2, home team and road team, but I don't know when the last time that the four underdogs covered in a playoff weekend. I mean, from a Vegas perspective, I don't know when that occurred, and that is what happened here this weekend in the NFL. And I'll tell you the other theme that I have for the weekend as far as the games are concerned is that you can sense it's wild card weekend. These teams are fortunate to be in the postseason. These teams are the 3 seed and lower for a reason. As far as Jacksonville and of course the Rams, those teams are not great, and you got a sense of that. You can put Kansas City and Buffalo and Jacksonville and Tennessee and throw in the Ravens and Chargers. You can put them all in a little in a pool and take 2 out to play Pittsburgh and New England. It could be any of the 2. This year it happened to be Jacksonville and the Titans. The NFC South basically is a cutthroat league, but the Falcons got a little break that they got a chance to play the Rams, who are not quite ready for prime time. Defense a little overrated, and they got run over in the second half. So to me, the 4 best teams, and let's put Wentz in the mix because he is not there right now, which is a problem. But the 4 best teams are Minnesota, Philadelphia, New England, and Pittsburgh, and everybody else. Now, I know the Saints are, had a good year, but I don't trust the Saints on the road. And I think Atlanta's, found their little equilibrium. They played a little better the last 2-3 weeks, but, the last 2 weeks specifically, they did lose in New Orleans badly there in week 16. But Atlanta's got a little experience, and their defense is pretty decent, and so they've carried through. But I don't even think Atlanta is a great team. I mean, and it's funny, the 2 teams in the NFC that are waiting now to play this weekend are doing it basically with backup quarterbacks. So from that standpoint, if you could take the Saints in Minnesota because, Breeze is better than Keenum, and you could take Atlanta and Philly because Ryan's better than Nick Foles. So when you get right down to it, especially in Philadelphia, if the quarterbacks were playing, and even Bradford, who had a very, very good year. Now, I understand Keenum's been great, so from that standpoint, you got to keep that in mind. Keenan has had a tremendous year, so I'm not sure if Bradford could have done any better. But, I think we're all waiting for the other shoe to drop with him, and nobody obviously is that wrapped up on Foles. So, I would be surprised if I hope there'll be one close game in the AFC in the divisional round. I would think Tennessee more than the Jaguars because Jacksonville's offense is pathetic, and Pittsburgh should have learned a lesson or two when Jacksonville walked in there in Week 5. And I would think you might get one team upset the other in the NFC. So one close game by a road team in the AFC, and maybe one upset. I know I can't consider Philadelphia an upset because Atlanta's favored, but one of the home teams lose in the NFC. That's the way I would look at the postseason picture as far as where we stand right now. Now, as far as the specific games are concerned, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to go in the games. I think the two storylines to me that I would take the most out of. Carolina played well, so you can't do anything about Carolina. They could have won the game. Cam was excellent, so I'm not sure if there's anything really can say. That game could have gone either way. I know Carolina trailed most of the way, but they did have the ball, the chance to lead late, so I'm not going to read too much into Carolina. They lost. All right, they had a pretty good year, and the Rams are probably a year or so away. Their run defense stinks, and Goff took a little while to get going. So I'm going to leave, and McVay Young, I'll leave those two alone. I think the two storylines are in the AFC if you look at the big picture. I think the first storyline is I think the Chiefs need a facelift. And I think the second storyline is Tyrod Taylor. They got to find another quarterback in Buffalo, which we knew anyway. But now I think we know for sure. Now, listen, it wasn't all his fault, Tyrod Taylor. I mean, they had an offensive pass interference, which probably cost them a touchdown. Why they threw the ball there, I have no idea in the first half. And then, of course, they had some drops. And then, of course, in the Chiefs scenario, I mean, when I say facelift, it's not just Alex Smith. I think Reed, and we all like Reed. He's beloved in the coaching fraternity, but he doesn't win playoff games. They get snake bit every year. Think about it, for instance. There's only two teams. There's only 4 games that have ever been lost in the postseason with teams with an 18-point or more halftime lead. Did you know that? Only 4 games have been lost in that scenario, and he's lost 2 of them. Did you know that? Teams are 67-2 when they have an 18-point or more lead at the half of a playoff game. Reed with an 18-point lead at the half in a playoff game is 0-2. One of the losses is the one they highlighted, the 57 49ers, who had that huge lead on Detroit and ended up losing that game to the Lions in San Francisco. A terrible loss for the Niners at the time. And the Lions went on to win the NFL Championship to beat the Browns the next week. 57-7, I believe the final was. I mean, but think about that for a minute. And I think it's time for the Chiefs for a variety of reasons. I don't think he's going to do it either. I think Hunt is very loyal, Clark Hunt. I don't think he's going to make any changes. But, the Chiefs won the division because everybody else shot themselves in the foot, including the Chargers. Alex Smith, maybe he goes. I mean, Alex Smith played pretty well in the game. So I don't want to sit there and blame it on Alex Smith. But for whatever the reason, and they just lost their offensive coordinator who came out of nowhere to get the Bear job. But I think the Chiefs need a change. I mean, it's a franchise that hasn't won a playoff game now since 1993 in their building. They won one playoff game under Reed. That was in Houston against the pathetic Texans. They don't beat New England in big games. That was a terrible loss. They had a 21-3 lead at the half. My gosh. That was the first takeaway that I had over the weekend is Kansas City needs to do something. They need to change the culture again. Reed has got a history of being just good enough to get a team to the playoffs and not good enough to take them beyond that level, and that's what happened the other day. So I'd be worried about them long-term where you are with Kansas City, and I would be worried about the Buffalo quarterback scenario. I know they had the good feelings with Week 17 with the help from Andy Dalton. They scored 3 points in a playoff game against a good defense, don't get me wrong, but 3 points in a playoff game on the road. Tyrod Taylor, he missed a lot of open receivers. He's just not accurate enough. He's good enough under the right scenario to take it to 9-7, and if the breaks right, and this year it did, maybe he can be a 6th seed. But if you watched the game yesterday, it's hard to think. Now, the same thing goes for Bortles, too, by the way. But, it's hard to think that the Buffalo Bills can go much further than they did here in 2017 with him at quarterback. I mean, there's nothing else to say. And the other kid, you can't count on him either. So I don't know where they're getting a quarterback. Maybe they get Alex Smith. I don't know. you want to take Kansas City's quarterback who couldn't win a playoff game? Again, Smith plays pretty well. He couldn't rescue his team out of the fire, but he had a pretty good year. He plays pretty well in the playoffs. He played great in Indianapolis 3 years ago, a game that Andrew Luck brought back the Colts. He played pretty well the other day. Maybe Alex Smith goes to Buffalo. Maybe he goes to the Jets. Maybe Kansas City keeps him. They got one more year left with him. Maybe they keep him. But Kansas City and the Bills will be the takeouts for me as far as the first wild card weekend is concerned. I mean, the Rams, maybe we underrated the experience of Atlanta. The Rams were the Rams who just, they got off to a bad start in the game, and then they got the game to 13-10 at the half, and they let the Falcons run right through them in the second half. That first drive, they took 8 minutes and kicked a field goal. That wasn't a killer. You don't like the way the drive presented itself, but they had a chance to overcome it. They did not, and Atlanta won the game going away. And again, I don't know what you could say negative about the Panthers. I mean, what did they do wrong? So they had the ball with a chance. The kid should have dropped the pass. He didn't. They would have had the ball at midfield. Dumb play by Peyton, 4th and 2. Whatever it may have been, Carolina was right there to win the game. So, I don't know if you can kill them. Cam is erratic. I get that. He's an erratic performer. But yesterday, off 2 bad games, he had a feeling he played well, and he played really well in the game. Nobody can knock Cam. And he didn't get a break on the intentional grounding. That could have gone the other way. And they ruled in favor of the Saints with the intentional grounding. His feet were straddling the offensive right tackle line, the imaginary one. They could have gotten away with that and called that non-intentional grounding. Carolina, I got nothing to say about. Rams are, a day late, dollar short. They will building something in L.A. They should be okay. Crowd was good, by the way. And the Chiefs and the Bills, to me, are the storylines. And I would say this, big picture. I'll say one game in the AFC will turn out to be close, and I'll say one home team will lose in the NFC. I think the Saints are better than Atlanta, but I think Minnesota's more dangerous than Philadelphia with Foles out. So take your pick. We take a timeout, 16 after the hour. We continue on Mad Dog Unleashed.